All right, so this unit is about budgets and budgeting your money. As a 45-year-old woman, I can kind of vouch for the fact that this is one of the most important things that you can learn to do, is to work within a budget and to learn to live under your budget just a little bit. So we're going to walk through this and sort of see how all of this plays out and give you some tips and things on applying this in real life. Here's some vocabulary we need to look at before we jump into your work packet. So first of all, you have this thing called an excess tax, which is a tax that's only on certain things. So if you were to go try to buy alcohol or cigarettes or things that are not necessities, they have a higher tax set on them. And the intent is to use things that are non-essentials in order for our country or our state or county to have extra income from things that are not essential items. And those taxes can change percentage-wise. We have fixed expenses. So in our house, one of our fixed expense is our house payment. It's something that has to be paid every month, and it's pretty much not going to change. Now, as we get into houses, that's not actually 100% true, because we pay into some other things. Occasionally they'll adjust our house payment, but it's a fixed expense. I know that I'm going to have to pay a house payment every month until my house is paid off. A variable expense are expenses that are not regularly scheduled. They're sort of unpredicted. So for example, my car tags are out right now. That is an expense that is not regularly scheduled. I know it's going to happen every year, but it's still a variable because it's not like a monthly expense. And if I were to sell that car and get something else or get rid of my car altogether, I wouldn't have that. So there's variable expenses. Income is how much money you make. And when you're dealing with your budget, you want to deal with your income based on post taxes. So if I make $500 prior to the taxes being taken out, I want to make sure that I'm budgeting based on what I'm actually bringing home. And then your budget is your estimated amounts that you're going to pay out or that you're going to spend every month. So let's discuss fixed expenses versus variable expenses versus what's called periodic expenses. Like I said a few minutes ago in the video, that there are certain things that I have to pay every month. This example in your worksheet packets talks about your car payment, your car insurance, your rent, your cell phone plan. So we have a certain amount that we pay every month. No, we don't have a car payment. I drive a podunk car, so I cannot have a car payment. So my fixed expenses would not include my car payment. It would include our insurance, our house payment, our cell phone. Those are all fixed expenses that we're going to pay every month. If you have health insurance that you're paying when you are older and have your own insurance, that would go there. Now, there are also things that we pay every month, but that they change. So, for example, our electricity. In the summer, my electric bill is going to be about $100 to $150 more than it is in, say, the fall or the spring, because I don't run my AC as much. Our grocery bill is constantly changing. Now, I'm always buying groceries, but they are variable expenses because the amount of those things are going to constantly change. This one has car repairs and the variable expense. I would probably, put that in my periodic expenses because you don't have a car repair every month usually. If you do, then maybe you should look at a new car. But that's my personal thing. I would not put a car repair in my variable expenses. I would put that in my periodic. But I would put gas in my variable expenses because I know that I'm going to have to put gasoline in my car, and depending on how far I drive or what the gas price is, that will be a variable expense. Periodic expenses are going to be things that, like your car registration, like I was talking about. I know I'm going to have to do it every year, but that can change depending on things. And then once you begin to own property, you'll have to pay property taxes. So things like that you'll have. Now your next sheet, this page, you have a worksheet or an exercise to do that asks you to find, so it says Jeremy's annual gross income is $70,000, estimate his annual net income and his monthly net income. Now, I'm not a big fan of the way they worded this because there are several different tax brackets, and you sort of have to figure out where this is going to fall into. Now, I will tell you, I looked this up, and from today's federal tax brackets, 20-ish% of his income, making $70,000, is going to be taken out for taxes. So annual gross income is pre-taxes. Net income is after taxes. So we're going to just sort of estimate that they're going to take out 20% of his taxes, or of his income, for taxes. So if I kind of work that backwards, I can multiply 70,000 by 80%, because 80% will be his bring home. So $70,000 times 80% will give us his income. That will be his annual income. Monthly income, then you just divide that by 12. And that number that you get is going to be a decimal, so just round it, because we're just sort of estimating here. So just round that to the nearest dollar, and actually I would round it to the nearest hundreds. Like if it was 5,325, I would just say 5,300. But whatever number you're comfortable with, just get it close and you're going to be good. When you make a budget, you need to make that off of your monthly income. So when you take your 70,000, multiply by 80%, that's the bring home. That's the annual. Divide it by 12, and that's going to be the number you're going to use for his monthly income. And then you're given this series of information to find the percent that he is using for those expenses. And to do that, you're going to end up using this equation here. Ooh, I don't know why it's so crooked. Sorry. Now, I did walk you through how we get there, because just in general, what percent of the total gives us the part. In this instance, we can rearrange those words to say what percent of his total income equals the expense. So then to find the percent, you just divide the expense divided by the income. So when I did 70,000 times 80%, the bring home, divided by 12, I have a certain number here. That's going to be his income. So to find the percent he uses on his rent, we'll do 1,200 divided by that number. And then when you get that, you're going to have a string of decimals. So when I do this, I get 0.257. That's going to round up to 0.26, which is 26%. Now, because we're dealing with percents, I only need to have two numbers. And when I am budgeting, I always round up to give myself a little bit of a pillow there. I'd rather round up, so I'm pulling out more money for that budgeted item than round down and end up with not enough money in the budget. So try to work through these percentages and see what you figure out. So one of the things that you have to do is you need to really look at your expenses. And this line or this phrase, living below your means, is really, really good advice. What that means is that you are not regularly spending more than you are bringing in. And the first step to that is really understanding how you're spending your money. Housing, food, your car, and really understanding that. And then it has this kind of circular graph. I don't care for the circular graph. I like the bottom one much better. But the circle one is for you to sort of see how the total adds up to 100. And if you'll notice in there, they have a small little chunk for miscellaneous. One of the things when you're budgeting is to make sure you're not budgeting every single penny and giving yourself a bit of a cushion there. And it looks like whoever this is has their housing payment, transportation, which would be gas, or if you're riding the bus or Ubering or whatever. Your food expense, your savings, they're putting 10% of their income into savings. And I will tell you, if you can start doing that early on, you will thank yourself when you're a grown up or when you're old. Clothes, they put 5% of that, and then gifts and entertainment, miscellaneous, and debt. Now, for me on here, I would have to add a cell phone payment. I would have to add electricity payment. I would have to add our Now they may put car insurance and transportation. They may have all of that sort of clumped together in transportation. I'm trying to think what else. We have a credit card that we're paying off of that would go in your debt. Any school loans that I have that would be in the debt. So you may, when you begin to do this for yourself, it may look a little bit different, but the idea is that your percentage ultimately equals 100, while leaving yourself a little bit of money in a miscellaneous section so you have a little bit of a cushion. They're going to walk you through a couple of exercises looking at different people's income versus expenses and ask you some questions in your opinion and have you do a couple of exercises. So I want to walk through what their examples are. And the first person they look at is Annie. And they recommend that your house payment, like what you're spending for your living expenses, which would include your electricity, your house payment, and all of those things should be under 30%. In order to give yourself enough income. This is a pretty good idea. So they have walked through Annie's income here, and it says that she gets paid bi-weekly, which means she gets paid every 2 weeks, which equals 26 paychecks per year. We're going to estimate her income by multiplying it by 70% because we're going to assume that's what she's bringing home after taxes. So her bi-weekly gross income is $3,000 because she gets paid twice a month. Then we're going to remember that 26 paychecks, and we're going to multiply that by the $3,000 by 70%. So that tells us that she is going to bring home $2,100 bi-weekly. Now bi-weekly means every 2 weeks. And they're multiplying this by 26 because there's 52 weeks in a year, and she gets paid every 2 weeks. So that means she's going to make $4,500 a month. So again, we've taken her gross income, multiplied by 70%, so that's what she makes home after taxes. Multiply that by 26 weeks because she gets paid every 2 weeks. Her rent is $1,500. By the way, we're going to assume that this is then what she's bringing home monthly. Okay. So her rent is $1,500. Her electricity is $80. That's one of those variable expenses. We're going to use what they assume is the average, and to find that, what you would do is just take several months and find the average by adding them together and dividing by however many months you used. They pay $90 a month for internet, $100 for their cell phone. So their total monthly housing expense, now they're including the cell phone in their housing expense because most people have to have that in their brains to live, and we all use that. So that's their housing expense. They're including rent, electricity, internet, and their cell phone. So her total monthly housing expense is $1,770. So to find the percent of her income, we're going to take the expense divided by the income. And they found that to be, and here's one of those decimals, 0.389. 0.389, and that rounds to 39%. Okay. Now, 39% is over 30%. So their assumption is that that is too much for your living expenses. And if you could keep your living expenses under 30%, that would be amazing. Most people are going to have a car payment. I'm not sure if you are actively paying a car payment or have looked at car payments recently, but they are outrageous. Gas is outrageous. So the lower that you can get your housing expense, better. And so they ask us, Annie is overspending on housing. Where could she reduce her spending? Now, the truth is, most things like internet are a set expense. We pay $40 or $45 a month for our internet, but I don't have cable or anything like that. It's just the internet. A cell phone is usually a fixed income or a fixed thing that you can't really change. Electricity, unless you're going to just not use your electricity, which is not existent in this area. Well, in any area, because we're all going to want lights. We're all going to want running water. And your rent. The truth is, she would, in my opinion, just need to find a cheaper place to live. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the next, I think it's Regina, maybe, I don't have that in front of me, but your next paper has a walkthrough of someone else's income and expenses for you to figure out and to work through that. So see what you can do there. Your next section is just talking about your monthly expenses outside of your housing expenses, your food, your clothes, and your entertainment. They're suggesting 20% on food, 5% on clothes, 12% on gifts and entertainment. Now, if you're still living at home, hopefully your food cost is less than that. If it's not, eat at home more. Let's talk about Ricky's monthly net income and his spending. So this is going to be one that they work through with you, and then the next page you're going to do some exercises on your own. Let's walk through this. So this tells us Ricky gets paid weekly. Again, we're going to estimate his net income by multiplying by 70% because that's what we're going to assume he's bringing home. He's in that tax bracket where he's getting that much percentage taken out. 30% is actually quite a lot. I would normally estimate 20% being taken out, but that's okay. So his gross income is $720. Multiply that by 70% to give us his bring home. So he is bringing home $504 a week. Multiply that by 52 because there's 52 weeks in a year. And then we divide that by 12 because there's 12 months in a year to get his monthly net income. So he is bringing home $2,184 a month. Let's look at his spending. And again, this is external from his housing. So grocery store, he spends $250. Takeout food, he spends $400. So his food expense, now they are including their groceries on here, not just eating out. So remember, if you're paying for groceries at home, it's still an expense. Now, if you're eating at home and your parents are paying for it, then it's not an expense. So to find his food expense, we add that $250 plus $400. It tells us how much he spends on clothes and going out with his friends. So that's going to be his entertainment. And we're going to do the same thing to find his percent that he's spending. And that is to take the expense and divide it by the income. And it looks to us like he is overspending in a few of these areas. And I think it asks you to tell us how you think you can fix his overspending. And obviously, because these are not necessary things, obviously, you have to eat, but takeout $400 can obviously be cut down. You don't have to always buy new clothes, and you don't always have to go out with your friends. Or if you go out with your friends, go to the park. Don't go to the movies. So there's ways to cut those expenses. Now you're going to do the next worksheet section, working through another picture of this and answering those questions as well. The last activity in this packet is actually showing you how to build a budget, and you're going to walk through this one with me, and then the next one in your packet is for you to build your own. And this guideline, again, goes back to the 30% of housing, 11% transportation, 20% food, 10% savings, 5% clothes, 12% gifts and entertainment, 7% miscellaneous, 5% debt. And this is a really good place to start. Now, if you're young and still living at home, the more of that you can put into a savings account, the better. Because then if you have all this money in savings, you won't maybe need the 5% to pay off debt, because hopefully you won't have that debt when you get to be as old as I am. So a pretty good guideline here. So let's estimate Jacob's monthly income, and it tells us again how much his annual gross income is. Same routine here, multiply it by 70%, divide it by 12 to find his monthly income. So Jacob is bringing home $3,150. Now to create a budget, we want 30% we want to spend 30% of our income on housing within our budget. So to figure that out, we just take our income and multiply it by the percentages. So 30% as a decimal is 0.3. So if I take his monthly income, $3,150, multiply that by 0.3, that tells me that he should be spending no more than $945 a month on his housing, which in today's economy is not much, because remember, the housing is including his house payment, his electric payment, if you have to pay for water where you live, and your phone and your internet is all included in their housing. And in this environment today, $945 is not very much at all. Transportation, this would include your car payment and your gas. They're saying 11%. Again, multiply your income by your percent. Food, 20%. Savings, if you can, start putting 10% of your income into a savings account. Clothes, gifts and entertainment, miscellaneous, and your debt. Now, in my brain, spending that much on clothes every month is way more than we would ever spend. I say that, here's the thing. We would not spend that much money on clothes all at once, but when it comes time for, let's say, back to school, we're going to probably spend more than that because that is one of those variable expenses. And if I am sort of setting aside $157 a month, by the time I need everybody to have a new pair of shoes and everybody to have a backpack and everybody to have new clothes, then I sort of have this money that's been sitting in my budget. So when I budget, here's what I've got. I have my income. And in January, I say I have $157.50 in my clothes budget. If I don't spend that, I I have this all written down, and I am a paper pencil person, so I have it in a spiral. Some people will create an Excel spreadsheet or some sort of workbook that they can keep track of this. So if I'm putting $157.50 in my clothes budget every month, if I don't spend that in January, in February, I'm going to add another $157 into that clothes bucket. And let's say I don't buy clothes in February, then March hits and all my kids need new tennis shoes. I now have that money for 3 months sitting in this clothes bucket, per se, that I can pull from then to spend. So housing, I'm going to spend that every month because it's a fixed income. Transportation, I'm probably going to spend that every month because it's a relatively fixed income and that I'm going to use it every month. Clothes, gifts, and entertainment, I can sort of add to that every month. If I want to eventually go on vacation, I can keep my entertainment money, $378 a month, and just add $378 every month for 6 months and set that aside and have that set aside for a vacation. So it's not like I do it once and if I don't spend it, then I can spend it, then I don't put it back in there. I'm constantly every month adding into this, and it will accumulate and eventually gain a large sum of money that I can use. Now you're going to do this for the next exercise that you're going to read through someone else's situation here and create their budget. And I would then suggest, if I were you, I would sit down with my income and my spending and sort of figure out what my personal budget would be. I don't know if you guys have a lot of expenses, but it's not a bad idea to sort of put pen to paper. Now, if you don't know what your expenses are, what I did when I first started my budget is I went to my bank and I got a printout of the last couple of months of spending on my bank card, and I went through and I sort of looked at how much I was spending on gas, looked at how much I was spending on groceries, looked at how much I was spending on entertainment, so I could have an idea. And I did 3 months, so I could have a pretty good average of those. So do the next section of information for the person that's given, and it's not mandatory. I'm not going to make you turn it in, but it would not be a bad idea for you to sort of try to create your own budget with your own income.